Do you ever feel like the world overlooks you? You work hard, but the bootlickers get promoted. You have talent, but your boss favors smooth talkers. You give your best every day, but no one seems to notice. The problem isn't the world, the problem is you. You're letting your emotions control you. You get angry when ignored, bitter when others succeed, and frustrated when no one acknowledges your efforts. But these emotions only make you weaker. In this video, I'll show you how to control your emotions, reclaim your power, and become unstoppable in any situation. If you're tired of being invisible, keep watching and start changing today. If this is your first time visiting the channel, hit subscribe and like so you don't miss out on exciting upcoming content. Gareth, 45, was a seasoned expert in the tech industry. After 2 decades of dedication, he had seen countless colleagues rise and fall. But one thing always frustrated him. Young, inexperienced guys who knew how to play office politics were constantly praised, while he, the one actually creating value, was overlooked. One day, Gareth poured everything into a major project. The result? A massive success. But during the final review meeting, his boss spent most of the time praising a younger colleague, someone who barely contributed. Gareth felt his anger surge. His mind screamed, "I put everything into this project, and that kid gets the recognition?" He was about to stand up and call it out, but then he stopped. A different thought entered his mind. I am a grown man. I don't need validation to prove my worth. In that moment, Gareth realized that if he let his emotions take over, he was handing control to others. From that day on, he decided to stop playing the game of seeking recognition. Instead, he focused on the only thing that truly mattered. Real power comes from results, not from compliments. Real men don't need validation. If you let praise determine your value, you've already put yourself in a weak position. After the meeting, Gareth felt a fire burning inside him. Part of him wanted to slam the documents on the table, look his boss dead in the eye, and say, "Do you even know who actually put in the work for this project?" But instead, he took a deep breath. He remembered a simple principle. Reacting on instinct is how weak men operate. The one who controls his emotions controls the game. Instead of letting anger take over, Gareth sat down, took a sip of coffee, and thought strategically. He replayed the entire meeting in his head. Why did that young guy get all the praise? Not because he was better, but because he knew how to present himself. He knew exactly what to say to please the boss and how to show up at the right moment. What would have happened if Gareth exploded right then? The boss wouldn't suddenly realize his mistake. Instead, Gareth would be labeled as the difficult guy, the one who's hard to work with. Losing his temper wouldn't win him credit. It would only make him look like a bitter loser. So Gareth made a different choice. He stayed silent and observed. He let things play out as usual, but in his mind, he was already forming a plan. If this game was about presentation, then he would no longer stay on the sidelines. When you lose control of your emotions, you give power to others. Smart men don't react immediately. They calculate and strike at the right moment. Gareth knew that if he wanted to reclaim his advantage, he couldn't just rely on hard work. Skill is the foundation, but the ability to control the conversation is the ultimate weapon. The following week, he had a one-on-one meeting with his boss about the next project. Instead of sitting back and waiting for recognition, Gareth took charge of the conversation. He didn't complain about being overlooked in the last meeting. That would only make him look like someone clinging to the past. Instead, he opened with a simple but strategic question. What do you think made the last project successful? This question forced the boss to acknowledge the key factors behind the project's success, most of which Gareth had been responsible for. When the boss started listing the elements that Gareth had directly handled, Gareth simply nodded and said, "Exactly. That's why I focused on specific tasks to make sure everything ran smoothly." This way, Gareth wasn't bragging. He was leading his boss to his own conclusion. More importantly, he had taken control of the conversation, steering the boss's emotions instead of letting the boss dictate his. Before leaving the room, Gareth added one last line. I want to make sure the next project has a clear strategy. I'll send over a proposal tomorrow morning. With one simple sentence, Gareth didn't just reassert his position, he took control of the next move. Strong men don't sit around waiting for recognition. They lead the conversation and shape how others think through the power of words. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you find this video helpful. It's the best way to support me in creating more valuable content. Gareth walked out of the meeting room with a newfound realization. He was no longer waiting for validation. He was in control. But there was still something lingering, the burning resentment inside him. Instead of letting it consume him, Gareth decided to turn it into fuel. He didn't complain to his colleagues. He didn't draft a long-winded email to express his frustration. He simply sat down, opened his computer, and got to work. He knew that the young guys at the company weren't better than him. They just knew how to play the game. So why shouldn't he learn to use it to his advantage? 3 days later, Gareth submitted a strategic proposal for the next project. No fluff, no unnecessary showmanship, just practical, results-driven solutions. And most importantly, he subtly positioned himself as an indispensable player. This time, when the meeting took place, Gareth didn't stay silent. When his boss brought up the plan, he spoke up. I've analyzed the risks of this approach. There's a way to optimize it. Here's how I did it in a previous project. Just like that, he turned being overlooked into an opportunity to establish his authority. He didn't beg for recognition. He made them take notice. You can let dissatisfaction drown you, or you can turn it into fuel. Real men don't whine. They act. After the meeting, Gareth returned to his desk, feeling like he had just laid a solid brick in his career. But not long after, a few younger colleagues approached him, their expressions smug. You're looking sharp, but do you really think the boss is paying attention to you? One of them sneered. Another chimed in, don't kid yourself, the ass-kissers always win. There was a time when words like these would have gotten to Gareth. He used to care about how others saw him, afraid of being judged, of being labeled as too ambitious or trying too hard. But not this time. He simply smirked, took a sip of coffee, and replied slowly, ever wonder why you're still sitting here complaining while others are moving forward? Silence. Gareth understood something most people missed. Weak people will always try to drag you down to their level. They don't want you to improve because it makes them feel insignificant. So he no longer wasted time arguing or seeking approval. His only goal was to become the strongest version of himself. If you let others' opinions dictate your actions, you'll always be their puppet. Focus on getting stronger instead of waiting for validation from the weak. A week later, the company held a leadership-wide meeting. Everyone knew what it meant, an opportunity to impress, to climb the ladder. Gareth walked in and scanned the room. Immediately, he recognized the same old script. The suck-ups were in full performance mode. A group of young employees huddled around the boss, nodding at every word, no matter how meaningless. Others cracked forced jokes, desperate to be noticed. But no one was actually contributing anything of real value. They were just trying to please the person in power. Gareth refused to play that game. He didn't need to be a sycophant to earn his place. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't say what the boss wanted to hear. He said what needed to be said. He pointed out the risks in the plan, proposed real solutions, and most importantly, he wasn't afraid to challenge authority. No fluff, no flattery, just the truth. As the meeting wrapped up, a senior executive pulled him aside and said quietly, "I like the way you stand your ground. Meet me next week. We need to discuss your new role." Lesson: weak men follow the crowd. Real men create value, and let that value speak for itself. Gareth started to realize that a man's presence isn't about what he says, but how he says it. In the past, he used to raise his voice in meetings to get attention, but now he understood. The more someone tries to appear powerful, the weaker they seem. Real power lies in composure. Influential men don't need to talk much. They just need to show up. He began training his voice. No more talking fast, no more stammering, no more trying to please others with rushed words. When Gareth spoke, he spoke slowly, firmly, and with purpose. Every word carried weight, nothing was wasted. His way of walking changed too. No rushing, no unnecessary movements. He walked as if nothing could shake him. One day, during a discussion with his team, a colleague interrupted him mid-sentence. In the past, Gareth might have snapped back or shown frustration, but not anymore. He stopped, looked directly into the man's eyes, said nothing, just stared. In those few seconds of silence, the entire room froze. All eyes turned to Gareth. The interrupter blinked and backed down, realizing his mistake. Only then did Gareth calmly continue speaking, as if nothing had happened. A man doesn't need to yell to command respect. When you control your tone and body language, you control the room. Three months later, Gareth was promoted. But that didn't mean the game was over. It had only just begun. A higher position meant more pressure, more responsibility, and of course, more envy. Every day he heard complaints around him. This job is too stressful. The boss demands too much. I deserve that promotion too. But he knew one thing. Weak men always find excuses for their failures. Gareth had no time for that nonsense. He didn't whine about the workload, didn't complain about the pressure, didn't seek sympathy. He simply faced the challenge and handled it. One day, an old colleague approached him, exhausted and frustrated. "I'm so tired of this job, I think I'll quit." Gareth shrugged, looked him straight in the eye and said, "Then quit. But don't expect life out there to be any easier." Real men don't complain. They face hardship and do what needs to be done. Stop whining, stop complaining, adapt or be left behind. In his new position, Gareth quickly realized one thing. Competence is just one part of the equation. Knowing how to control others' emotions is the real key to winning. During a leadership meeting, a senior executive kept hitting him with tough questions about his plan. A weaker man would stumble or go on the defensive. But not Gareth. Instead of reacting immediately, he paused for 3 seconds. Just 3 seconds, but enough to make the other man feel the pressure. Then, he gave a slight smile and replied, "That's a great question. But instead of focusing on the risks, why don't we talk about how to make it more effective?" By shifting the conversation, Gareth put the executive on the back foot. He didn't react emotionally. He controlled the emotions of others. From that moment on, people saw him differently. He was no longer just a hardworking employee. He was someone they had to respect and be wary of. Smart men don't let emotions control them. They control emotions and steer the game. Gareth wasn't a genius. He wasn't exceptionally lucky. He had one thing most men lack: emotional discipline. Gareth wasn't born a genius, nor was he luckier than anyone else. What set him apart was his ability to control his emotions instead of being ruled by them. He didn't lash out over unfair treatment. He didn't beg for recognition. He didn't follow the herd or suck up to authority. He did one thing and one thing only: mastered himself and took charge of the game. The world doesn't care how you feel. Angry? Frustrated? Bitter? No one gives a damn. But if you learn to control your emotions, you will control others. You will hold power, and you will win. Look back on your life. How many times have you failed simply because you couldn't control your temper? How many times have you quit because your emotions made you weak? Now is the time to change. Stop reacting. Stop complaining. Take control of your emotions and own the game. You have 2 choices: be controlled or be in control. Decide. Thank you for being here. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like this video. Don't forget to leave a comment so we can spread positivity together.